Welcome to this deep dive into managing overwhelming feelings.
Yeah.
You know those moments when your emotions just feel like too much to handle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, your sources this time offer a really practical approach.
I was really impressed by how they blend like the science of emotions with actually usable advice.
It's not just about surviving those moments.
Right.
It's about building up that emotional resilience for the long term.
Yeah, that's key.
So before we even jump into like the how-tos, let's get a handle on why we even feel overwhelmed in the first place. One of your sources mentioned feeling overwhelmed in meetings, and that reminded me of like how my heart races before presentations. The sources talk about the amygdala. What is that all about?
So the amygdala is kind of like our emotional watchdog.
Okay.
It's like constantly scanning for threats in the environment.
Mm.
And when it senses danger, whether it's real or just perceived,
Yeah.
it triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It doesn't always get it right.
Yeah.
So like in your case, you're prone to pre-presentation jitters.
Oh,
Your amygdala might be overreacting to situations that aren't actually dangerous.
so like it's yelling fire in a crowded theater when it's just someone's phone ringing.
Exactly. And that's why understanding your triggers, your personal triggers, is so crucial. Once you know what sets off your amygdala's alarm bells, you can start to manage those responses more effectively.
Okay, so let's say my amygdala is going crazy even though like logically I know I'm safe. What can I do to kind of calm that storm? These sources mention grounding techniques, specifically the 5-4-3-2-1 method. Have you found this helpful in your work?
Absolutely. It's one of the most effective techniques I've come across, both for myself and with my clients.
What is that exactly?
So you intentionally focus on 5 things you can see,
Okay.
4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. You're essentially pulling yourself back into the present moment.
It's like hitting the reset button on my senses. But how does that work? Why does focusing on these external details help with my internal feelings?
It's all about shifting your attention. When you're caught up in that emotional whirlwind,
Yeah.
your mind is completely fixated on the threat or just the feeling itself.
Mm-hmm.
And this technique forces you to kind of engage different parts of your brain by noticing the details around you. It's a very gentle way to interrupt that stress response cycle and regain a sense of control.
Yeah, that sounds much better than telling myself to calm down, which never seems to work.
Exactly. It's working with your brain, not against it.
Yeah.
The sources also talk about deep breathing as another way to soothe the nervous system. Have you ever tried box breathing?
I haven't, but I'm very intrigued. What makes this particular type of breathing so effective?
Box breathing is like a rhythmic anchor for your breath.
Okay.
You inhale for a count of 4,
Okay.
hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4.
Okay.
This really simple pattern helps regulate your heart rate, and it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the one that's responsible for that rest and digest response.
So it's like signaling to my body that it's okay to chill out. I love how these techniques tap into our body's natural calming mechanisms. And speaking of calming, the sources also talk about self-soothing techniques. What do they suggest?
They really emphasize using sensory aids to create a sense of comfort and security.
Okay.
Think a warm bath, a soft blanket, calming music, or even a cup of herbal tea. The idea is to engage your senses in a way that promotes relaxation and counteracts that stress response.
It's like creating these little pockets of peace in the chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I find so fascinating is how personal those preferences can be. Like what soothes one person might not do anything for someone else.
That's very true.
So we've got all of these in-the-moment tools to calm down.
Right.
But how do we keep those big feelings from taking over in the first place? I know mindfulness comes up a lot in the sources that I sent you. Is that something you found valuable?
Oh, absolutely. Mindfulness is a very powerful practice for building long-term emotional resilience. And one of your sources mentioned feeling overwhelmed when trying to make decisions. Mindfulness can be incredibly helpful in those types of situations.
Yeah, because when I get stuck in that overthinking loop, it feels like I can't make any decision at all.
I hear that a lot. But with mindfulness, you learn to kind of observe those thoughts and feelings without judgment, just allowing them to come and go like clouds.
Yeah. Yeah.
This creates space for you to respond to challenges with greater clarity and intention rather than just reacting impulsively.
It's like training my mind to be more of an observer than a participant in the drama of my thoughts and emotions.
I love that. That's
Wow.
a great way to put it. And one of the simplest ways to cultivate mindfulness is through focused attention on the breath. Even a few minutes a day can make a huge difference.
It's like giving myself permission to just be present in the moment without all that mental chatter.
And that sense of presence is a really powerful antidote to feeling overwhelmed.
These are all great strategies for calming down and building like inner peace. But sometimes those big feelings just hit so hard and I need more than just like a breathing exercise or a warm bath. The sources talk about journaling as a way to become an emotion detective, which sounds so interesting to me.
It is. Journaling is like having a conversation with your emotions. It's not just venting or recounting events. It's about going deeper to understand the why behind those feelings.
Oh, okay.
So for instance, imagine you had a stressful encounter with a coworker. Instead of just writing, I'm so angry.
Yeah.
You could explore what specifically triggered you. What were they saying or doing? What were the thoughts running through your mind? What sensations were you feeling in your body?
It's like turning my journal into a lab for understanding my own personal emotional patterns.
Exactly. And as you become more aware of those patterns, you can start to identify your triggers and develop healthier coping mechanisms.
It's like that saying, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more I understand about my emotions, the more equipped I feel to like navigate those challenging moments.
And that empowerment is key to building that lasting resilience.
Okay, so we've covered so much here. We talked about why we feel overwhelmed, how to calm down in the moment, and even become more mindful of our patterns. What else should we be considering?
Well, one of the most important aspects of navigating emotional challenges is recognizing that we don't have to do it alone.
Oh, yeah.
The sources really emphasize the power of social connection.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how simply talking to a friend can make a difficult situation feel more manageable?
Oh, absolutely. Just having someone listen and validate how I'm feeling can make a huge difference.
That's exactly it, the power of human connection. And it's not just venting, it's about seeking support, understanding, and different perspectives.
So it's not just what I do on my own, but who I can reach out to when I need help.
Precisely. And the sources highlight that vulnerability, the willingness to open up and share our struggles. That's actually a sign of strength, not weakness. It allows us to build deeper, more meaningful connections with others and create a support network that can help us through anything.
It's like admitting that I need help is the first step to getting it, and that can be incredibly empowering in itself.
It is. And it leads perfectly into one of the most important points these sources make. How we see these big feelings really influences our ability to manage them.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more about that. What do you mean by perceiving emotions differently?
Instead of seeing those overwhelming feelings as enemies to be conquered, what if we thought of them more as messengers?
Messengers. Okay, that's an interesting way to think about it. What kind of messages are we talking about here?
Well, think about it this way. You mentioned earlier feeling overwhelmed when you're trying to make a decision. What if that feeling is actually your intuition trying to tell you something? Like maybe you need more information.
Okay.
Or you're not totally on board with the choices you have.
So instead of getting mad at myself for feeling overwhelmed, I could look at it as a sign to just pause.
Right.
And investigate a little further.
Exactly. Or let's take anxiety. You said you feel your heart racing before presentations.
Yeah.
What if that anxiety is actually a type of energy that you can use?
That's a totally different way of looking at it. Instead of trying to make it go away, maybe I could try to channel it into something more positive.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, aren't necessarily bad. They're just signals, trying to tell us something important.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to get us to understand ourselves and what we need better.
And the better we get at listening to those messages, the easier it'll be to deal with all the complicated stuff life throws at us.
This is so empowering. It's like we're taking back those feelings and turning them into something that can help us instead of hurt us.
That's what emotional resilience is all about. It's not about getting rid of those feelings, but changing how we relate to them.
You know, I'm starting to see how it all connects. We've got those in-the-moment tools for calming down, the mindfulness practices for more awareness, journaling for deeper understanding, that social support system, and now reframing how we see our emotions. It's like a whole approach to feeling better emotionally.
And the best part is you can adjust all those tools and techniques so they work for you. There's no one right way.
Right. It's about experimenting and finding what works for you.
Yes.
Which reminds me, we talked about self-soothing earlier, but how does that fit into all of this?
Self-soothing is a great way to regulate your nervous system and create that sense of safety and comfort, like giving yourself a big hug emotionally.
And it can be so personal. Like some people love a warm bath while others would rather take a walk outside.
Exactly. It's all about figuring out what brings you a sense of peace. One of the sources mentioned cuddling with their pet when they're stressed. That's a perfect example of that personalized self-soothing.
It's about using things around us to make us feel good. And the more we do those things, the better we get at handling our emotions, right?
Like working a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
We've covered so much ground here. From the science behind it all to the things we can do to feel better, I feel like we've gone through all of emotional resilience.
And we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes this so exciting. There's always more to learn about ourselves.
So it's a constant process of growing and changing.
Yes.
Okay, well, before we wrap up, are there any other things you think our listeners should know?
One thing that really stuck with me was the importance of being kind to yourself. It's easy to get down on yourself, especially when you're struggling.
Oh yeah, when I'm dealing with those big feelings, I'm super hard on myself.
But here's the thing, blaming yourself only makes it worse. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
So how do we show ourselves more compassion, especially when all those negative thoughts are taking over?
It starts with realizing that we're all human. We all mess up. We all have times when we're not at our best. And that's okay.
So it's like giving yourself permission to not be perfect.
Yes. And it's about treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend, with kindness and understanding.
So instead of getting mad at myself for feeling overwhelmed, I could try to be more encouraging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how much that can help, just changing how you think about it.
It's like replacing that negative voice in your head with a more positive one.
And that can help you heal and grow.
I love that.
Yeah.
We started with the science, and now we're talking about being kind to ourselves.
And as you keep learning these things, you'll become more resilient, more in control, and better able to handle whatever life throws your way.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much that I can use to manage my own emotions better.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this isn't the end. It's an ongoing journey.
It's about taking what we learned and continuing to try new things and grow.
And as you continue on this path, remember to be patient with yourself, celebrate your successes, and don't underestimate how powerful it is to be kind to yourself.
Those are great words to live by. And to our listener, I hope this deep dive has given you the tools to look at those overwhelming feelings with more understanding, compassion, and confidence. Until next time, we hope your journey is filled with growth, resilience, and that deep inner peace. You know, it's amazing how much my perspective has changed from exploring these sources. It's like I'm not scared of those overwhelming feelings anymore. It's more like I see them as a way to learn and grow.
That's exactly the kind of shift that leads to real change. The fact that you're willing to face those feelings head on instead of trying to avoid them shows how committed you are to growing as a person.
I think what's really hit home for me is that these emotions aren't just random. It's not like they're just happening to me. They're trying to tell me something.
That's a really important takeaway from this deep dive. Every single emotion, even the ones that feel awful, has a message for us. It's like they're sending up a signal flare to get our attention.
And sometimes those flares are so bright, it's like they blind you. But I see what you mean. It's about figuring out what they're trying to say instead of just trying to put them out.
The sources you gave me do a great job of explaining exactly how to do that. It's not about being in perfect control of your emotions all the time. It's more about developing the skills and the awareness to handle the whole range of human experiences.
It's like we're getting a whole new set of tools to help us feel better emotionally. And the best part is we can keep adding to those tools and improving them as we learn and grow.
The journey never really ends. And that's what makes it both exciting and kind of comforting. There's always more to find out about who we are and how strong we can be.
Before we finish up, is there anything else from the sources that you think would be helpful for our listener?
One thing that stood out to me was how important it is to make these strategies your own. What works for one person might not work for another, and what helps in one situation might not help in a different one.
It's like we each have to become emotion detectives, figuring out what clues make sense for us as individuals.
Exactly. So as you try out these different techniques, pay attention to what feels right to you, what calms you down, what helps you see things more clearly, what gives you the confidence to keep moving forward.
It's about trusting our own gut feelings and being willing to change our approach when we need to.
And remember, you're not going through this alone. The sources really stress the importance of having people you can lean on. Talk to people you trust, get professional help if you need it, and surround yourself with people who want you to grow and be happy.
It's like we're all in this together, helping each other through the tough stuff.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree. But before we go, I wanted to thank you for guiding us through this. What you've shared has been so helpful.
It's been my pleasure. And to our listener, I want to leave you with this. As you keep working on being more resilient, remember to celebrate every win, no matter how small. Every time you become more aware, every act of self-care, every brave decision to really feel your emotions, those are all victories worth celebrating.
That's such a great reminder. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has made you feel more confident and compassionate when those overwhelming feelings come up. Until next time, may your journey be filled with personal growth, strength, and a deep sense of peace within.